Thank you. Thank you for coming back. And now the third presentation of this morning will be given by Jacques Combat. And Jacques Combat is a SNRS research engineer at Verigma Laboratory. He works on the design and the verification of real-time embedded systems using formal methods. In 2018, he joined EcoInfo. It's a CNRS group addressing environmental and societal impacts of ICT, and is now partially shifting his research activities to these very interesting topics. Then Jacques, you have the mic.
Okay. So is it working? Yes. So thank you very much. So welcome to this talk about rebound effects. So I need to say first that since I am new in this research topics, I have no contribution in this field, and I mostly did some literature review and things like that. But I spent quite some time to do that for EcoInfo mainly. So I will start with what is the rebound effect and why this is an important question matter for sustainability. So maybe you heard this term rebound effect. So what is it all about? So it started during the Industrial Revolution, and and during this time there was a lot of improvement of the steam engine efficiency. So this is shown on this graph here with different engineers and different ways for improving this efficiency. And you might expect that coal consumption at this time was decreased because of all these improvements, but of course it increased exponentially. And Jevons, who was working on coal reserve, the amount of coal reserve in the UK, concluded that actually this increase in efficiency was one of the causes of this increase in coal consumption. And this was because of economical reasons. So by reducing the cost of use of steam engine, you boost the use of steam engine, and then you end up consuming more coal. Another example of rebound effect, which is well known, is what is called induced traffic. So you increase road capacity, no problem. You increase road capacity, and you expect that you will reduce congestion in cities. And what you observe in many cases is that you get exactly the same level of congestion. And this is because travel demand and road capacity are not independent. Actually, they are related, and there is a strong relation between the two most of the time. So to go back to, let's say, a more global picture about mitigation of CO2 emissions, one very common way to frame the problem is the following. So you say that CO2 emissions can be decomposed in different factors. One will be total population, so number of people in the world. Another will be affluence, which is the amount of goods and services which are produced and consumed for these people. And the last one is technology, which gives you the carbon intensity of all these goods and services. One proxy, one way to measure affluence is to use the GDP, which is an expression in monetary terms of affluence. So it will be expressed in GDP units per capita. So you know what is GDP, probably. And on this graph, this shows how all these parameters evolved since 1960, and everything is normalized from 1960. So you can see how everything grown. And why this is related to rebound effect? Because of the following. So Most of the economic scenario for mitigating CO2 emissions rely on a strong improvement in technology, in efficiency in general. And the goal is to reduce the CO2 emissions while keeping a growing GDP. So this is what is called decoupling. And in this case, this is absolute and sufficient decoupling. And this is the goal, at least for some economists. Problem is, as we saw with Jevons paradox, by pushing technology, we may end up with even more growth of the GDP, and we may miss our targets in terms of CO2 emission mitigation. And people are usually aware of this problem, so this is why in many reports you will see rebound effect. In many reports claiming that ICT may help in reducing CO2 emissions of different sectors. But most of the times, they just say rebound effects are not included in the study, most of the time. So to go a little bit into details about what is the rebound effect. So I take this example of CO2 emissions from chip manufacturing. So on one side, you have the technology factor. So it could be CO2 emissions per transistor. And on the other side, you will have the total number of transistors which are produced per year. And the total CO2 emission from chip manufacturing is just the product of the two, so it's just the surface of this shape here. Due to Moore's law, you maybe expect that there will be a reduction each year of CO2 emission per transistor. So on the T side, let's say 30%, which corresponds to Moore's law. Actually, it's not exactly this in practice, but let's imagine that. The problem is each year, the total number of transistors is growing by 50%. So you end up with growing CO2 emissions from chip manufacturing. And the question about rebound effect in this case is, in general, is there the causality link between these two, between the technology factor and the other side, so the population and affluence factors. Of course, we expect a relation between the two because due to Moore's law, transistors are getting cheaper and cheaper. They are getting smaller and smaller, so we pack more of them in CPUs, we buy more CPUs and so on. But we don't know exactly what is the relation between the two. How to quantify rebound effect? Imagine that we establish a causality, an exact causality between the two. So this plus 50% is totally explained by the minus 30%. In this case, we will call this situation backfire because CO2 emissions are increasing globally. And to quantify this, we simply divide what is lost by what we expected as gains. And usually it is expressed in percentage. So here it would be 116%. So backfire is when this ratio is above 1, so above 100%. So if you do this exercise for different aspects of ICTs, so CO2 emissions from use of wireless networks or CO2 emissions from data centers, you see usually the same pattern. So huge improvement in terms of efficiency, but huge increase in affluence. And most of the time, CO2 emissions are increasing or at better they are steady, as we saw in the previous talk. So let's switch to this part, which is about how to estimate rebound effects. So as I said, we are looking for a strict causality between an efficiency improvement and an increase in, let's say, consumption. So ideally, what we want to do is to compare a scenario which is excluding efficiency to a scenario which is including efficiency. For past rebound effect, we can be based on, let's say, real cases and compare two real case situations, which differs only from the fact that you have efficiency or not. And this is exactly what people are doing when they are testing medication and drugs and things like that. So they are doing random control trials. But you can also compare real case with a counterfactual scenario, which is something that did not happen, but you think it would have happened without with efficiency, for example. And of course, if you want to predict future rebound effect, you need to rely on models on both sides, so for both scenarios. And usually tools for that could be surveys, polls, as I said, randomized control trials, statistic models. So let's illustrate a bit this problem of looking for causality. So let's take this example. So you expect that because of telecommuting, people are working from home and they will commute less, of course. So it's good for CO2 emissions. But maybe you think that at some point they will relocate further away, and this could be because of economic or time gains because they are commuting less. And how to evaluate this? So as I said, ideally what you want to do is you pick a random sample of workers, and at some point you force them to telecommute. And you observe the effect by comparing telecommuters and non-telecommuters. Of course, this is very difficult to do in practice. You don't want to force people to telecommute. So what you could do instead is you observe people, and at some point some subset of them decide to telecommute, and you observe the effect on the distance. And this is what they did in this paper, and you use kind of temporal precedence to establish the causality. Of course, you may have a lot of bias due to this kind of reasoning, but you could say this is better or nothing. Most of the time, what people are doing is also what is called cross-sectional study, which is you pick a random sample of workers and you just observe correlation between the fact that they telecommute and the distance they live from work. Of course, you may have a lot of problems with confounding factors, which could influence both aspects, the fact that they telecommute and the fact that they live further away, like income and so on. And even if you monitor all these possible confounding factors and you remove their effect, and you compute exactly the link between telecommute and distance, you don't know what is the causality. So to illustrate counterfactual reasoning, I have this example from ADEME in France. So it's an example about long-distance ride-sharing. So you expect that with ride-sharing, because you put more people in cars, you will reduce CO2 emissions from traveling. The thing is, if you ask people what they would have used in terms of transportation means instead of ride-sharing, and you do the math, you obtain almost 100% rebound effect. So all the gains you expected are just taken back by the fact that they switched from train to cars, or they even travel more and so on. So in this case, the counterfactual scenario is obtained by doing a survey. You can take exactly the same example and you do an economic modeling, in this case very basic, based on price elasticities and so on, and try to predict what would be the rebound effect in this case. And according to price elasticities, you expect something more like 20%. So this could be explained, the difference between these two figures could be explained by the fact that the economic motivations are not the only motivation for ride sharing. But of course, this is, in both cases, we don't know. This is modeling. So quantifying rebound effects is a very difficult thing. And this leads to also another topic, which is even if you want to quantify rebound effect and you have a perfect way of doing this, what are good metrics for your T and for your P and the VA? So for Moore's law, as an engineer, probably the technology factor would be based on transistor as a unit. Because I know what's inside the technology, I know what is technological progress in ICTs, and I will pick number of transistors, let's say. But if you want to study a rebound effect from the consumer perspective, they are not buying transistors, they are buying smartphones, computers, and so on. So they don't see the Moore's law. And there are studies showing that the practical performance from computers is not following the Moore's law. Sometimes it's even going backwards. So in this case, what is a good metric is a good question. And another question related to that is this rebound effect is coming from consumer or it is coming from software developer, which are kind of wasting CPU power with larger applications and so on. A similar example can be found in transportation by car. So there are huge improvements in fuel economy, but cars are getting larger, more powerful, heavier, and we are also driving differently from what we used to be with more speed, acceleration, and so on. And again, it's very difficult to pick the right metric. So let's switch to the last part of the talk. So what causes rebound effects? So I will start with just saying that there are different types of rebound effects, actually. And I talked a lot about the direct rebound effect from efficiency, but actually there are also indirect rebound effects, which is you have economic gains, for example, and you invest on something else. So you decide not to use your car, but you buy holiday tickets, and this increases CO2 emissions, let's say. And this is why there exists also a rebound effect from sobriety and sufficiency. Another point also is the different scales of rebound effect. So from consumer to markets, societal transformation, economy-wide effects. And of course, it's very difficult to establish causality on large-scale effects and long-term effect. One way to explain the rebound effect, which is from François Schneider, which I like a lot, is to speak of this in terms of limits. So rebound effect comes from the fact that efficiency or sufficiency are pushing away consumption and production limits. And those limits can be of different kinds, different types. So we talk a lot about economical limits, but there are also physical limits, technical limits, psychological limits, sociological limits, and so on. And of course, these limits can be combined to explain the things. And this is very important to point this thing. So to illustrate this combination of limits, let's consider passenger transportation. In many work, they are combining time and economic limits because these are limits which are very important in transportation. So if you take the example of travel by car in France, according to Aurélien Bigot, until 2000, the distance traveled by car by French people was increased because of decreasing costs in terms of monetary cost and time costs. So time costs were decreased because of the speed which increased during this time. But from 2000, this is not the case anymore. Speed is steady, so time costs are steady. And even if monetary costs are decreasing, people are not increasing the distance they travel. So if you look only in terms of monetary cost, you lose part of the story. So it's very important to think about this problem in terms of, having multiple limits which are combined. And so this leads me to those examples. If you take 5G, it is pushing different types of limits with time, cost, with energy efficiency, and so on. And we expect rebound effect from 5G because of all this combination of limits. If only energy efficiency is improved, probably there would be a small rebound effect. But actually, we are pushing away with 5G a lot of different limits. So different limits mean different views, at least, or different disciplines to study these limits. I will go very fast, but most of the work in rebound effect was focused on consumer theory and microeconomic aspect with the famous Homo economicus and notion of utility. But I think for large-scale rebound effect, this should be complemented by other different views. So technical view, I won't detail all these things, but because usually in economy, this is very abstract. You have a few different values, and you lose, a lot of details. And of course, the psychological view, sociological view with how social practices evolved, and a lot of different aspects of that, historical view. So to conclude, I think we need to go beyond the quantified and let's say neoclassical economic framework, which is used most of the time to explain rebound effect, because it has a lot of limitations, and it is only looking usually at the economic limit. And I think this is very important for large-scale rebound effects, how the society is transformed and so on. And for this, I think we need a multidisciplinary approach to things. I mean, to incorporate all the details and the complexity of this phenomena. And we are probably also focusing too much on efficiency. It could be an engineer-based, or it could be a cultural-based. But this is not new, and even Jevons was focused on efficiency also. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacques. And we have already a first question here from the audience, right at the back.
Hello. Yeah, I'm a PhD student. It's a really quick question. I was just surprised that you say that efficiency and sufficiency push the limits. Can you explain why sufficiency?
Yes. So imagine you decide not using your car. This is a sufficiency approach. This is a sobriety approach. But by doing so, you will have some economic gains or even time gains because you are not traveling by car, and you will do something else, or you will spend your money in a different way. And this would be an indirect rebound effect from sobriety.
Another question here in the middle. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question about, is there a link between that data generation and the rebound effect about this?
Data generation?
Data generation and rebound effect. Is there a link between these two aspects?
I mean, this is something I did not say, but rebound effect is, I said this is about pushing the limits. And I mean, growth policies from state or companies are all about pushing the limits. So data generation is, I think it is in this line. So accumulating a lot of data for economic development and so on. And this is related to rebound effect in the sense of economic growth. Why are we producing data?
The question was about the efficiency of technology that that allows a more data generation. So the link.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, okay. So rebound effect in data generation. Yeah, of course. If you do the math, it's not possible to generate such amount of data with the technology from the, let's say, 50s. It's physically impossible. You need several planets to hold all this stuff. So there are, of course, rebound effects everywhere. Not only from transistors which are getting smaller and so on. But
Another question? Yes?
Thank you very much for the nice talk. I had a question regarding your conclusion. You mentioned that in the engineering field in general, we focus on efficiency, and I pretty much agree with that, and I think it's quite a problem actually. But how do you think we can change that? Maybe as people that are teaching at university, how do we raise awareness?
A difficult question, but I think we had part of the answer this morning. So from the talk from Jean-Paul. So first of all, this is a global problem. This is not an engineer problem. So when we are talking about global things and economic dynamics, we are not talking about just I mean, technology and so on. This is like global way of organizing things. So first thing is to look at things globally, because rebound effect it's all about looking at things globally. And then yes, so this means that even if we modify the way engineers think, this is not enough, because you need to ask yourself why people are thinking in this way, and why we are teaching people to think in this way. And this is not, I mean, there are good reasons for that. Yeah, but at least we can try to to do a little bit better and to see at global scale what we can do.
Okay, another question? I have maybe one question for you, Jacques. As you mentioned, you are really at the beginning of these studies for you, and in your lab, what are really the topics on which you are working on if you want to work on more sustainability and to include maybe those kind of studies of rebound effects? What are really the topics on which you are working, basically, in your lab? Because you have a lot here of young PhD students that they're also currently making research, and they are wondering what they can do, how they can act, and you are very active with EcoInfo. And just to know personally what you are starting to do.
So I started to look at these problems in my work. It was more like some opportunity. So I was very involved personally, but not during my work on these questions. And I met EcoInfo. I started to be more involved by that. And of course, my previous research topics, they are not related to these questions, and maybe they are not compatible with these questions. So I started to learn a lot, to read a lot, and not to take the first good idea and to try to do something and to produce. And I'm still learning a lot and reading a lot about that. And I am currently trying to switch my research topics. So this is why I read a lot of economics and things like that. And but I don't know. So yeah, actually, we started. We have one PhD working on new topics, but this is totally new for me, and yeah, it's very difficult to switch from my previous research topic to these new research topics. I mean, I don't want to be the guy who would take his previous skills and try to use them. It's like having a hammer and trying to find a nail. So, of course, I have a background in optimization and so on, but I don't think this would help.
Thank you very much, Jacques, for your answer, because we had already 2 questions from the audience about education and how we can really, fuel differently the society with engineers which are more aware about all of those problematics. That I think is going to be a central discussion this afternoon, because we feel all the same. I think that we have been educated, we have, a certain, we are formatted with a certain way of thinking, and it's very hard and it takes time, as you say. You are reading a lot. Many people here also trying to read different topics outside our main disciplines, And yeah, it's a very difficult task, but thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And we can move to the next speaker.